Hi, everyone. My name is Tara Kalk. I am the project coordinator for the Southeast Mental Health Technology Transfer Center on the School Mental Health Initiative. We are very excited for today's learning session that will provide guidance and resources on implementing social emotional learning during a crisis. If at any time during this webinar you have any audio or technical issues, the chat box is open for you to communicate with our teams. We might be able to assist you. And if you have any questions or links to resources that you'd like to share with other attendees or questions for the presenters, please enter those into the chat box as well. And I'm going to read a quick disclaimer. The views, opinions, and content expressed in this presentation do not necessarily reflect the views, opinions, or policies of the Center for Mental Health Services, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, or the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. And today's session is brought to you by the Southeast Mental Health Technology Transfer Center, or MHTTC for short, the School Mental Health Initiative within the MHTTC. We are located in Atlanta, Georgia at the Emory University Rollins School of Public Health, and we're proud to serve 8 states in HHS Region 4 that you see pictured here. Our center includes faculty and staff with expertise in public health programs, finance, policy, and health systems. And this provides us with a unique lens through which we can address mental health priorities in our region. The goal of our center is to accelerate the adoption of evidence-based mental health programs and practices by providing training and technical assistance to Region 4. On the next slide, you'll see a picture of our website. We encourage you to visit southeastmhttc.org, and you can find upcoming trainings as well as archived recordings of our past trainings and webinars. And now I'm very happy to introduce Drs. Elizabeth Connor and Michael Strambler. They are both faculty members who specialize in school-based mental health at Yale University's School of Medicine in the Division of Prevention and Community Research. Elizabeth is also a faculty member with the University of Maryland National Center for School Mental Health. She received her PhD in clinical child and community psychology, and her work focuses on improving access to high-quality mental health promotion, prevention, and intervention services and supports for underserved youth and their families in critical access points, such as schools and community settings. Mike is the Director of Child Wellbeing and Education Research at the Consultation Center at Yale. He received his PhD in clinical psychology, and his work focuses on the role of social environments and the academic, psychological, social, and behavioral well-being of children and youth. He also studies whether and how school-based programs improve the academic performance and health of children. And I'll hand it over to you, Elizabeth.
Great, thank you so much, Tara. We are so pleased to be here with you today, and a warm welcome to everyone who's joining us. We know that the majority of folks who join these calls are from the Southeast region pictured here, but we always have a great representation of participants from outside the Southeast region and across the United States as well. So wherever you are calling from, you're welcome here. And I just love seeing all of the introductions coming through the chat. Please do type your name in the chat box as well as your organization and your state. That's really helpful for us to see everyone who's on, but it's also helpful for us for participation purposes. And it's wonderful to see all of you already introducing yourselves there. So as those introductions are continuing through the chat, I just want to start out by framing our webinar with some learning objectives and an agenda. So today we're here to talk about social emotional learning skills, or SEL for short, that can be taught through classroom activities and routines. And in this session, we're actually highlighting a targeted, feasible approach to implement SEL during a crisis with SEL Kernels. So by the end of today's session, you should all have a good understanding of SEL skill domains and how to conduct a needs assessment to identify student needs and priority areas for selecting specific free or low cost SEL lessons or practices for your students. The goal of these is to be kind of flexibly implemented with teachers and with mental health staff who are available to provide coaching and consultation supports. So hopefully at the end of this session, you have a much clearer sense of all of those working parts. You should also have a sense of how to really integrate these SEL implementation approaches in your local school or district or throughout your state in a way that's practical, feasible, and effective. So we actually have a district leader, Ms. Dawn Capes, joining us a little bit later to tell you exactly how implementation has gone in Bay District, Florida. So we're excited to have her as a special guest from our local district as well, who we've been partnering with. So here's our agenda, just to lay out the order of operations for the webinar today. We are going to start with some SEL skill domains, so I'll hand it over to Mike Strambler in a moment to take us through these beginning pieces. I recognize that some of you coming to this webinar may be hearing about social emotional learning for the first time, or you may consider yourself somewhat of a novice in this area. There are others coming to this call for whom you may already be very well steeped in social emotional learning skill domains and practices and interventions. So hopefully for those of you who are kind of in that latter group, we'll see this kind of foundational beginning review as something that's helpful as you continue to communicate the importance of SEL to others, the value of it, the different aspects of SEL. So whether or not this is familiar to you, hopefully reviewing the SEL skill domains and how to assess SEL skills will be useful. Then we're going to walk through some processes for identifying SEL kernels or practices that could be locally specific to you. And we're going to tell you a little bit specifically how we did this with Bay District schools in Florida so that you get a real clear practice example of how it's worked in reality. And as I mentioned, we've got a guest speaker coming about halfway through to speak with you. She'll be on speaking about our SEL kernel implementation. And plenty of resources throughout. You know, we're all about the free resources. So please see this as a time to ask about resources, share things with one another in the chat. We'll have some poll questions throughout, some discussion questions. We want this to be a really interactive session. So with that, Mike, I'll hand it over to you to talk about some SEL core competencies.
Thanks, Elizabeth. And thanks to everyone else who came to show up and participate in this presentation and conversation. And please do excuse my cat who has just chosen to harass me at this very moment. So if you see me picking him up and dropping him off, please excuse that. So let's just all get on the same page about what SEL is. This is the focus of this presentation. Just want to get down some basic fundamental definitions of what SEL is. This is one framework by CASEL, the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning, based in Chicago. It's one of the more popular conceptualizations of SEL. Maybe many of you have seen this CASEL wheel of SEL competencies. So competencies are one way of framing SEL. Another, though, is that SEL is actually a process. As the name implies, it's a learning process for acquiring certain competencies. And in this wheel, they focus on 5 different competencies. The orange indicated here on the wheel refers to intrapersonal strategies, competencies. So things like ability for one to control their own emotions and behavior, and their self-awareness. This is sometimes referred to as emotional literacy, being aware of one's own emotions and internal processes. And then the blue refers to interpersonal competencies that have to do with how one relates to and the competencies one have for relating to other people. So social awareness refers to being able to understand others' behavior. So the ability, for example, to be able to put yourself in another person's shoes. Kind of the technical term for this is, well, we don't need to get into technical terms. The technical term, the main concept is that you're able to kind of put yourself in another person's shoes. If you want to know the technical term, it's theory of mind. And then the relationship skills have to do with how to manage positive and negative relationships with other individuals. And then the last one here is responsible decision making, is being able to make decisions that are consistent with one's values and goals. So I mentioned that this is one, yep, you can go to the next slide, that this is one of many different frameworks for SEL. We will be focusing on a framework called Kernels, as Elizabeth mentioned, but I did want to mention that there's some very useful work that has been done on categorizing the different types of SEL frameworks and developing taxonomies of SEL frameworks. This work was done by Stephanie Jones and colleagues at Harvard University from their EASL lab. We have a link here in this slide that you could go to learn more about the other frameworks that exist. And so this is an example here on this slide. And at the bottom part of the slide, you can see some examples of this. Is just a partial list of SEL frameworks. And at the website, you can click on these things to learn more about the elements that make up these frameworks and some of the main outcomes that they're interested in producing. And then at the top here, you can see another formulation of the different types of frameworks that break down each framework in terms of providing you an overview, who developed it, and what age grade level it's designed for, and what setting. And then there are various ratings for different components of the program. So a rating, for example, of how much it gives attention to culture and diversity, and how many support materials are available. Okay, you can go to the next slide. So what do we know about social emotional learning? So when SEL first came on the scene, we didn't know a whole lot about it. And one big question that practitioners would often answer would be, okay, well, how is this related to academic performance of students? You might be able to show that you can affect social emotional outcomes for kids, like those things that are on the castle wheel, but how's it related to academics? Well, we now have quite a substantial body of research on this. A number of so-called meta-analyses have been conducted. Meta-analyses are essentially studies of all studies within a particular domain to look at questions around effectiveness. And so what we learned from some of these studies is that in general, overall, there's about an 11% gain in academic achievement among students in SEL programs. And there also have been some important econometric analyses that have been done that looked at the benefit to cost ratio of SEL programs. The biggest one and most well-cited one found that among 6 SEL programs that were tested, there's about an 11-to-1 benefit to cost ratio, meaning that the benefits outweigh the cost by 11-to-1. Other studies from the meta-analyses and additional studies has found other SEL related outcomes regarding enhanced SEL skills and attitudes, positive improvements in positive behaviors, fewer conduct problems among students, and lower levels of emotional stress. Next slide. So I mentioned that we're using a framework developed by Stephanie Jones and colleagues at Harvard. This is a formulation of some of the domains that we focused on with Bay. And this is how they characterize these types of competencies and abilities. So you can think of brain power as cognitive abilities of having to do with things like being able to pay attention and regulate one's attention, having control, impulse control, behavioral control of one's emotions and behaviors. And then there is feelings power, which has to do with one's emotions. So being aware of one's emotions and having, I mentioned that behavioral and emotional controls under brain power is actually under feelings power. Feelings power has to do with one's ability to be able to regulate their emotional and behavioral reactions. And then an important one that has grown to become more and more part of SEL is being able to have empathy and perspective taking. That's related to the earlier strategy I mentioned of being able to put yourself in another person's shoes. People power is similar to the interpersonal skills I mentioned in the Castle model. That concerns things like being able to understand social cues and conflict resolution, friendship skills, character, power. You can think of, or citizen power, you can think of in terms of character development. Those are things like values and habits that guide actions. And then attitude power is mindset skills. So how people, kids and adults think about their themselves and others. So many of you may be familiar with growth mindset developed by Carol Dweck. That would be an example of a type of attitude power. Okay, next slide. Just a quick overview here. I mentioned here that if you're interested in understanding SEL implementation from a program perspective, the Castle does have a guide to programs where they provide evaluative information on, I think, 77 or so different programs. This is a very useful resource to find out whether these kind of programs are a good fit for your particular school. And we'll return to this issue of fit because this is a really important point, that there is no one program that will be best fit for every school. But I just wanted to pause here and hear from some of you about what, so we have a poll here for this one, right? Did we open the poll for this?
Oh no, not this poll, but I think we have, folks can raise their hand to share aloud or type in the chat, but we do have a poll coming up soon, so stay tuned.
All right, it's not this slide. Okay, so yeah, so I'm curious to hear from some of you, and you can either put your comments in the chat or you can speak up, what SEL programs you're implementing. And if you also want to share, what are some of the barriers you've experienced bringing SEL programs to scale? Okay, I see strong kids. Second step is a very popular one. I've worked with that one as well. Choose Love. We're doing some, my son's school is using that. Rhythm app. Okay. Less familiar. I'm less familiar with that one. Okay, rise. Satchel SEL pulse. Okay, this is one of the challenges, getting teachers to buy in and using the lessons throughout the week. Yeah. Sources of strength, COVID and as a barrier, getting back into schools. Yep. Conflation of SEL with other things, critical race theory and the like. Yep, as a barrier. Yes, a lot of that happening. Okay, you're piling T to T connection in Oregon. Okay, this is it's very useful for us to hear some of these some of this that you're sharing with us, and then we'll try to return to some of this and discussion points. Um, so you can see there's a wide variety of different kinds of approaches are being implemented. A range of challenges that range from just being stressed from COVID to the conflation of SEL with other kind of programs that can potentially lead to lower buy-in, which is something that someone else had mentioned. I think you mentioned it among teachers, but we're also seeing that lack of buy-in is pretty common among communities and families as well because of some of this conflation. So thank you for sharing. We can go to the next slide, which is a good tie a good segue from some of the other comments related to COVID. So this is a declaration made by the American Academy of Pediatrics, American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry and Children's Hospital regarding the emergency that many kids are experiencing, largely in part of the pandemic, school challenges, and mental health challenges, the effect on mental health. So even prior to COVID, we were seeing an increase in mental health problems and depression, anxiety, and suicide. COVID has only exacerbated this problem. So these organizations have identified this as an emergency. And over the past several years, there have been a lot of attention given to school-based mental health approaches and social emotional learning approaches to address this. I believe there's something like 50, the amount of funds that are being devoted to SEL programs have risen by, I think, about 50%. Okay, kernels. So what is the kernel approach? So I'm going to give you a little overview here, and then I'm going to pass it on to Elizabeth. So the idea of kernels was first introduced by a person named Dennis Embry, and then it was recently built upon by Stephanie Jones and folks at Harvard. The idea of kernels is that with regard to a social program, you're trying to find the most active ingredients regarding the effectiveness of a given program. And so these are approaches that are also intended to be kind of relatively simple and low cost, easy to implement. And so the intervention, the approach focuses on these kind of nuggets of effectiveness that one introduces to achieve some kind of social impact. As it relates to SEL, there are SEL related nuggets or kernels for which we have some evidence of effectiveness. But they get at the core, their foundation of what is causing some of the effects we know from research. And one of the benefits is that it allows you to select these approaches based on student needs and the teaching goals and style of the settings in which you're trying to implement these approaches. They're not tied to specific curriculum or programs, which can be attractive to some people. And their low burden makes them relatively simple to implement. And you can select and adopt these needs as needed, depending on the context in which you're in. I mentioned that that SEL approaches in general are highly dependent upon the schools and context in which you're implementing them. And so we wouldn't say that everyone should consider SEL kernels. Some schools prefer programs. There are some pros and cons of kernels and programs. One of the advantages of kernels are the things I just mentioned, but programs also have some advantages in that they are often more manualized, structured, and some schools, administrators, and teachers prefer that approach to implementation over a more flexible, less manualized, less structured approach like kernels. So I will pass this on to Elizabeth to talk a little bit more about what this looks like in action.
Thank you so much, Mike. That was such a great setup. And hopefully folks are feeling a little bit grounded in SEL competencies, skills, some of the frameworks, and then also this kernels approach. So we thought the best way to really describe to you how you might consider taking on a kernels approach for yourselves locally is to share with you how we've done it with one school district that we're partnering with in the Florida Panhandle, which is in the Panama City area, Bay District Schools, Florida. So just want to set this up so that as we're talking about this project, you have a sense of what it is. We worked with, so far to date, we've worked with 5 Title I elementary schools in Panama City, Florida on this partnership. This is a community that has experienced multiple community-wide crises and school disruptions prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, actually starting with Hurricane Michael, which was a Category 5 hurricane in 2018. And so they reached out to us not long after that to put together a multi-tiered approach to trauma-sensitive classrooms that could be piloted with some schools in their district to then sort of grow it district-wide. And then of course the COVID-19 pandemic has happened and it's really added another layer of community-wide stress to this community. So it's important for you to know that as we talk about the trauma-sensitive classroom project that we've been doing in partnership with Bay District, that the SEL kernel part is just a piece of it. It's really the tier 1 of the trauma-sensitive classroom project. So basically what we did to select SEL kernels for these schools can be broken down into 3 steps. And we'll kind of go into them a little bit more in detail. But in general, we started with a teacher survey to assess student SEL skill needs. We knew that we couldn't address all of the different categories that Mike talked to you about and all of the different skill needs. Our goal was to really pick a few to make it most feasible and implementable for teachers, but we needed to know what were those skills that students needed the most help with overall to give us some guidance about what types of kernels we should pick. We actually selected kernels to match the survey results and some other local considerations I'll talk about. And then we moved forward providing training and ongoing implementation support to teachers. So just to give you a sense, people will often ask about what our survey looked like for teachers. This is a snapshot of the different sections of our summer survey. So we asked teachers to tell us about the students' SEL skill needs, and we had some other sections as well. We asked teachers to tell us about their own SEL skill needs, as well as their current teaching practices for students and for themselves, because we wanted to get a snapshot of whether there were curricula or programs or pieces of those things or practices that were already happening as part of the local context, and that would kind of inform which kernels would be a real value add for teachers in addition to what they were already doing. We also asked them to tell us about anything that they're using as well as their own demographic and professional characteristics. So if you want to check out our survey and all the other materials from this project, there's a link at the bottom of the slide to an OSF site that you can go check out. And there are also related measures from our team. Mike has done this work in Bridgeport, Connecticut and other places. So if you're really looking for copies of the survey that we use, they are all in the public domain and you can access those surveys there. You're welcome to adjust them as it fits your needs. So just wanted to kind of dial into the student skill SEL section of the survey, since that's the most pertinent for this conversation. This is the type of question that a teacher would be responding to. How much support do your students need for each of the following SEL skills? And we gave them definitions of each of these. We have just the character skills definition shown here to give you a sense. But we want to pause and ask, if you asked your teachers, or if you're a teacher yourself, if you were to pick one of these SEL skills that you feel like students need the most right now, what would that be? Tell us in the poll. This is kind of a little microcosm of what we did on our student survey. What are you seeing among your students locally right now? What do they need the most support with in terms of skill development? So go ahead and vote on that poll. Tara, it says to me that the polling is closed. Do we need to relaunch it? There we go. Now we've got some votes coming in. All right. Let us know what you all think. What would your teachers say? Or if you're a teacher, what's your perspective? And some of you may be closer to student interactions than others. I know we have people of all different levels of school mental health on these calls, all the way up to our state leaders of education and mental health. So just based on what you think, what are you seeing? What are you hearing? Got a couple more coming in. Okay, I think it has slowed down, so we're going to go ahead and share these results. Survey says emotional and behavioral control absolutely received kind of the highest votes. 59% of you who voted, about a little bit more than half of you voted. So emotional and behavioral control really came up high. So this is an example of what we did with our survey. We asked the teachers to tell us what are the needs that they're noticing right now. And we gave them definitions of each of these skill areas, and we gave them examples. This was really, really helpful for us. Okay. This is how we did it. Actually, believe it or not, we had 96 teachers that responded to this survey over the summer. So shout out to Bay District school educators who completed this. We worked closely with Dawn and her team there about how to actually embed a quick video where we described the project into a Canva course. So it was actually part of what teachers were required to view and take over the summer. We gave them the link to the survey. So even though we kind of launched this in June, we were able to get a bunch of responses by July, and then sort of rapidly work internally with our team to identify these kernels so that we could train these teachers before they went back to school, which, as some of you all know in the South, is an early school start date. So we had to get down there in August and do some training. And this is what teachers told us. So not too different from what we learned on this poll that was just taken right now. You can see emotional and behavioral control did come up the highest for the educators who completed our survey, but some other things as well, some impulse control and, areas of that brain power section, as well as a real concern about conflict resolution in the people power category. So this survey from the teacher's perspective was really foundational for us as we move forward to select our SEL kernels. Our objectives were, of course, to pick kernels that match the survey results, but there were other things at play as well. We really needed to meet kind of local needs and interests. We wanted to select practices that appear in evidence-informed curricula. So we wanted to pick things that were very popular across evidence-based programs and curricula. And there were a number of different considerations that came up as we did this kind of rapid iterative process where our team would look at the results and the data, and then we'd bring it to the Bay District team and say, here's the kernels that we think could fit, you know, how would this go? So we did this fairly rapidly to get ready for the teacher training. We were really interested in kernels that had open source or public domain materials that could be used quite flexibly, things that were short and practical to implement, that were not embedded in kind of a proprietary program necessarily for us to access it. This was an elementary, you know, pilot project that we're doing at this point. So they had to be pretty flexible all the way from pre-K up to 5, certainly informed by our needs assessment. And, you know, we're looking for core things. We're looking for the basics. We're looking for a little handful of basics that teachers could do in their daily classroom routine that wouldn't feel like too much of a lift, as long as we were layering in some good on-site coaching and consultation to help them with that. So please type in the chat as we're continuing through the next few slides so we can hear from Dawn. But if there are other considerations that are important to you when choosing specific SEL strategies or lessons, please put that into the chat, because a number of you said that you're considering right now what SEL programs to onboard or different strategies. So what are some of the things on your wish list that you would need? This is a resource we wanted to be sure to share with you because it was developed as part of this process. You know, our team really reviewed a wide variety of public domains, kernels, and strategies and mapped them onto the SEL skill that they correspond with. This was very helpful for us being able to look by SEL skill and find a menu of kernels or strategies that correspond. So if this is an approach that you're looking to take on, I do recommend checking out our SEL library, where you can find a whole menu of different lessons, practices, and artifacts for the specific SEL skills that you're wanting to support your students with. So this is kind of our results slide in a way. Here are the 5 kernels that we selected, but know that, you know, these fluctuate a little bit year to year based on what teachers tell us their needs are. I know Don will speak to that in a moment. And in general, this is what we picked. We picked some brain breaks for teachers to be able to help students with that cognitive brain power and releasing those feelings of energy, refocusing on their work, as well as some feelings power strategies. You saw the emotional and behavioral control was really high. So we wanted to make sure teachers had some materials to do routine feelings check-ins, whether that's kind of in the beginning of the day as part of a morning circle, or midpoint throughout the day, or end of the day, so they could find a time for students to name or express or indicate how they're feeling, as well as a menu of calming choices that were vetted by the teachers and okay for students to use either in the classroom or out of the classroom as they need that to re-regulate themselves. In people power, this has kind of changed up a little bit the last 2 years. In last year, we were doing really I statements and reflective listening. This year, we shifted gears to focus on class rules and routines. Part of that was because we could train teachers before the school year started. And so we wanted to make sure that there was sort of an opportunity to do that for people power. And then we've had a little focus on mindful moments, which I think is really fun. And actually mindfulness taps a lot of these different skill areas. So it's a great bang for your buck. All right, so Dawn, let me hand it off to you to tell us a little bit about what this has looked like on the ground.
Thank you, Dr. Connors, and everybody for having me on today. I appreciate it. Hello from Bay County, Florida. Very nice to see everybody virtually in this forum. So, you know, when we were first brought the trauma sensitive classroom, we had trauma sensitive classroom here, but partnering with Yale was for us post hurricane. Hurricane Michael roared through in October of 2018. And if you've seen some of the pictures, it was very destructive for just about, I would say, 90% of our county. So we had a lot of destruction, a lot of students traumatized by the storm because there wasn't a big evacuation at the time. So we brought in Dr. Connors and the team to help one of our schools that was really experiencing what we would say are some extreme behaviors. We had some students that were taking hours to de-escalate, throwing furniture, peeling the baseboards off the wall, and they would not respond to an adult asking them to de-escalate. They wouldn't respond to their parents. And so our administrators were spending the entire day trying to manage this situation, and their cry for help was help us, just help us do something. We don't know what to do. So when Dr. Connors and her team came in and I attended the session, I think that first time it was really a lot about honoring teachers' toolkit, right? It was, you already have a big toolkit. We just want to help hone the strategies that you already have with these extreme cases. And we had a lot of facilitators. We had a great almost 1-to-3 ratio of providing support to teachers. And Dr. Connors was there for some of the very extreme measures that we had. And I would say we had some success with that model because there was a lot of one-on-one coaching. But I think what came out of that for us anyways was sort of an observation that we had, that we assumed a lot of the teachers had a big toolkit. So, but we had to kind of step back and go, okay, so where's our gap? We assume they have a toolkit. Why do they not have the toolkit? Did they forget about the toolkit? They're so stressed out they can't remember how to open. They're like panicking, can't open the toolkit. What do we know? So then when we kind of came into year 2, that's when we really started hitting the pandemic era, right? And so we really had to reboot. We didn't have subs. We couldn't invite people into classrooms. So we did a lot of virtual work. And we also started to hone now the conversation about what do we want teachers to implement. And we added a cadre of facilitators. And I would say a little bit more successful that particular school year. But I would say for our response would be teachers were still so stressed out. And it's like they couldn't absorb any additional information. There was the trauma from the hurricane added into the thank you, Dr. Connors, added into the the COVID and everything that went along with that. So as we started into this school year, it was like, I love when talking to Dr. Connors, sort of respecting the journey that the teachers were on and realizing, okay, we have to get super specific and not assume that there is a toolkit that they're pulling from. And here's something we've been working on locally that may speak to other educators here. For our district, the number of teachers that we have that are from 0 to 3 years, they have yet to have a normal teaching experience. We're hitting at about 28% of our teachers. Brand new, they've never had a normal teaching experience. Okay, so that's part 1. Part 2 I want to share with you is we've recently finished our iReady of K-8 students. We have 26% of students who are on grade level, 26%. 42% are 1 grade level behind, 17% are 2 grade level behinds, and 16% are 3 grade level behinds. So when we talk about teachers feeling overwhelmed, number 1, it's because 28% of our teaching cadre is either brand new or has yet to have a new teaching experience. They really don't have a toolkit. Number 2, we have students who are experiencing a lot of learning loss. So we have teachers who are stressed out over how do I help them, as well as teachers feeling the pressure, what do I do? And so when we add all of that together, the last thing I wanted to share with you, because a lot of you are going to feel the same way too, is think about the last normal school year. For a senior, for us, their last normal school year was the 8th grade. For an 8th grader, their last normal school year was the 4th grade. And for 5th grade, it was 1st grade. So one of the things what's really been landing with me lately is, okay, our students, not just learning loss, it's that whole thing that you get from school, social skills. How do I cope? How do I self-regulate? They haven't had time to practice that or learn those skills while they're in their classrooms. So because of all of that, I think that for me is one of the reasons why this kernel is so great for us, is because it says, you know what, this is the small bite. How about at the start of class, you start with a feelings check-in. Let's try that. And I think that for a teacher who may be feeling overwhelmed, I think that you know what, I can do that. I don't have to learn anything new. I don't have to implement anything big. I can start 5 minutes. I can do that. And I think that's manageable. And for our teachers, it opens the toolkit and kind of puts something simple in there that they can do. So this year, kind of trying to be mindful of, okay, I got people who are teetering on the edge of like they're hanging on by their fingernails. How can I move forward this idea of this kernel approach, but not feel like I'm coming in from the district and, waving my finger? You got to do this. You got to take care of this. So what I've landed on is I'm asking the principal, who are your early adopters? Who can I go in and celebrate a calm down corner, a mindful moment, that I can celebrate that they're giving the students calming choices, and what are those? And when would be a good time for me to see that? I had a great visit with one of our schools. They were coming back from lunch. It was second graders coming back from lunch. So as you can imagine, they were very, very excited. She had them do what we have, the mindful moment with the Mind Up program. She used her chime, they calmed down, they loved it. It was obvious they had done it before. And I think they took a little advantage. There was a visitor in the classroom. They really wanted to do their other one too, which was really a guided meditation. They all laid out on their calming carpet. It was like, go to your special place. And one of the girls called it her calmful place. And I just thought that really spoke to her working that in. So I saw 3 in that classroom in addition to the calm down corner. So I think that for us, trying to celebrate implementation is one thing that we've really worked on. It's not about coming in and walking classrooms and checking it off. I've created little certificates. Thank you for being an early implementer. I appreciate you. And really trying to make it be as low key as possible, but celebrating that they're doing it. And then the second thing I'm doing is when I have conversations with principals and we're trying to problem solve maybe a specific situation. One of our schools was talking about, we're having a lot of explosive behavior. And I'm not just an educator, but I like to be educated. And one of the things I've learned from Dr. Connors is, is it really explosive? Maybe there were signs along the way that we missed that I tried to talk to the principals about and say, what is your teacher doing a check-in in the morning? Are they, as the students walk in, are they kind of figuring out what to do with the students? And I think that for us, all of that together, we're slowly advancing this cause of not just having conversations about trauma sensitive classrooms, but also implementing some of those trauma sensitive classroom kernels that Dr. Connors has been working with us this year. So Dr. Connors, I hope that kind of shares some of the Bay District Schools stuff that we've got going on.
It's perfect. We are just so appreciative of you joining, Dawn, and I can just tell from the way you're talking. I mean, I think it's so clear what a champion the district has been for the schools that are implementing. You're very close to the experiences of the teachers. You have a lot of empathy for what they're going through, and it has been celebration oriented, strengths-based oriented, and I think that's a big part of the success. So I know that Dawn has to hop off and go to her next thing, but if folks have follow-up questions for Dawn, I know we know where to find her and we can bother her, and she's very responsive. So if this is something that you'd like to connect to another district leader about, please let us know and we can connect you with Dawn. All right, so as we are just kind of landing the plane here to the top of the hour, you know that we like sharing some resources with you all because hopefully you're really excited about this topic and you're thinking, okay, how can I really get the information that I need for figuring this out? So the first thing to really just consider, I think, is a point of reflection, as Mike mentioned earlier, is you've got to think through to what extent a kernels approach is a good fit for your district, or are you more comfortable with onboarding a comprehensive program or curriculum? There are some advantages and disadvantages, kind of pros and cons of both that Mike spoke to earlier, but this is an important set of questions to think about as a team. You heard Dawn mention Mind Up and my comment in the chat there. It does not mean that you have to pick one or the other, but if you're picking some SEL kernels to focus on for key student skills and key student needs, make sure that those things are in alignment with the more comprehensive programs or curricula. So if you follow up questions about that, let us know. I also know Mike is available to answer individual questions in the chat. He's kind of our resident SEL expert if you guys haven't gotten wind of that already. So if you've got individual questions in the chat, please feel free to put that in for Mike and he can answer you. I also see that Dina and probably others would love to connect to Dawn for more information. So Tara, if you have Dawn's email address, I think she'd be comfortable with us plopping that in the chat. Otherwise, we can reach out to people individually and give them her email address. All right, so keep some questions coming in through the chat. I'm going to review some resources quickly and then make sure that we get you to our evaluation poll. If you want more information on the TSC project, as I mentioned, the SEL Kernels piece is really one component of a multi-tiered approach for this project. It's really kind of their tier 1 piece. There is a 3-pager here. It's pretty brief and it goes a lot more in detail than we had time to dive into today. So check out our OSP site with project materials for this 3-pager. The brief TSC overview that's screenshotted here, you can actually access directly on that bit.ly link if that's a faster place for you to go to. There are a number of other free SEL resources. I will say this is a question that we receive a lot. I think Mike and I both receive a lot. You know, what are the free SEL programs or packages out there? What strategies or approaches can we access if we don't have a budget at all or our budget is very limited? So these are good ones to know about. The Greater Good in Education website here, as well as PERTS and the Khan Academy Growth Mindset, are all great places to go for SEL strategies and approaches that would be consistent with the Kernels approach. You may also be interested in the assessment tools. So how do we conduct a teacher survey or a survey in our district to really understand what skills students need the most support developing? And remember, that's really a critical piece of this methodology, right? You don't want to pick SEL kernels out of the sky. You want to make sure that you're getting some teacher reported information, that there's sort of multi-stakeholder conversations happening with the schools and districts. So you're honing in on a small handful of kernels that are going to be highly relevant for your locale and well matched to what the students' needs are. So those assessment tools are absolutely pertinent to this method. And so we encourage you to check those out. And again, adapt them, pilot them, adapt them to your needs locally. For those of you who have spent some time with us on our Southeast MHTTC webinars and other regional MHTTC webinars, you are hopefully already familiar with ClassroomWise. For those who have not heard about ClassroomWise, we wanted to make sure to put a plug in it here because there are a number of elements of this free online course that are consistent with social emotional learning skills and strategies that can be used that are not tied to a specific package, program, or curriculum. So this is a free 3-part training package for K through 12 educators. It has evidence-based strategies and skills to enhance and support students, generally kind of just tier 1 student population, as well as some of your students who may be exhibiting some early signs of mental health concerns in the classroom. So there's an online course, a video library, and resource collection. This was developed by the Mental Health Technology Transfer Center Network in partnership with the National Center for School Mental Health. You can see in the course description here of the 6 modules of ClassroomWise, modules 1 and 3 are highly consistent with social emotional learning and a kernels approach. So I mentioned that one of our kernels in Bay District was developing rules and routines of the classroom with students, right? So not the teacher coming in and say, you know, welcome to the first day of school, our rules are posted, you know, here on the wall, but rather let's have a conversation about what rules and expectations are needed in our classroom for everyone to feel safe and respected and ready to learn. So that's a strategy, you know, developing those rules and routines with the input of students is an important strategy that teachers can do at the beginning of the school year and also revisit throughout. There are some awesome videos demonstrating how to do that specifically in Module 1. So if you want to go over to the Module 1 resource library and check out some of those videos, it's just one example of how you can find elements of these SEL kernels in both Module 1 and 3 of ClassroomWise, which is also free online. We've noted a number of references from the research literature and other scholars today, so we want to make sure that you have this here as well for your reference point. I hope that this information was very valuable for you. I hope it was practical. I hope you feel like you've gathered some things that you can take and use locally. We absolutely want you to keep in touch with us. So I have a slide here that is from the Southeast Mental Health Technology Transfer Center. As I mentioned earlier, and as we can see from folks who have introduced themselves in the chat, there are a number of people on our listserv for these webinars and following us on social media outside the Southeast region. So if this is your first webinar with us, or if you're not connected to all these ways to keep in touch with all the great things that the Southeast region is doing, please add these to your list of ways to get notified about learning events and resources coming out of Emory University and the Southeast MHTTC. And with that, we ask that you please complete this evaluation survey for SAMHSA. This is part of our receiving SAMHSA funding, not only understanding what elements of this talk today were useful for you, what you'd like to see differently, but also so that we can communicate the potential impact of this work and this learning session. It's a very brief survey. We always try to wrap up a minute or two early so you have a second to take it. So please go to this survey now. If you've completed this survey, the Southeast MHTTC will send you a certificate of completion. So I know I received some questions during the webinar about getting a certificate of completion for attending today. So everyone who completes the Skipper survey will receive that. So thank you in advance for a couple minutes of your time to complete this evaluation. And with that, we just want to thank our funders, SAMHSA, so much. Also, Mike Strambler for his time, Don Capes for joining us, all of your active participation. These webinars and learning events could not happen without the village and knowledge network that we have for school mental health nationally, and the shared learning that can happen when we all talk to each other, work with each other, and share resources freely. So thank you so much for your time. I'll keep the evaluation survey link up for folks who may still be completing that. And with that, this ends kind of the final portion of the webinar, and we wish you a wonderful rest of your day.